We do have a quorum. We should be, we have Nona dialed in, but I don't know, how do we? Yeah, maybe let's check. That's always a good thing. So but I do think that we can. Can you hear me? It sounds like I'm being mic'd. Okay. Okay. Good. Well, let us, let us call the meeting to order. Catherine McGill,
Judith Murphy.
Miriam Plunder.
Nona Chariello,
Megan Richards.
Yogi Zimmerman.
Teresa Coleman.
You might want to mention for the record that we don't see anything.
somehow it seems like the connections are fine, but we are not, seeing on the big screens. So I don't think it will impact the running of the meeting or the ability of the public, to make input. But that's just the way how it is. So, why don't we go ahead and, get started? Let's see, we do not have anybody online. So why don't we just go ahead and, does anybody have any oral communications that they'd like to bring up? It sounds like a beater. Oh, Mary. Good. Yeah, so, are there any questions, for the open communication part of the meeting from anybody who is here? Since nobody else dialed in. Okay, good. So, next on the, agenda is approval of the minutes from last meeting.
I have a change.
Okay,
Under 5 tree permits, where M. Plunder stated she has spoken with J. Biggs. This needs to be, I spoke with several people and I emailed, so I would recommend we just say, has spoken with the town.
for staff, town staff.
Yeah, town staff.
Good idea. Good. I didn't see anything else. Okay, so shall we, I move to approve the minutes as, with the changes made it, stated,
Second.
all approved, all in favor?
Aye.
So Zimmerman and Murphy will be abstaining.
Yes. Okay, good. So now, we have one site permit. We have had one site permit this month. And this is for a Cal water pump station. And Nancy and I are working on that. We just went over to take a look at it today. So one thing I noticed, when I was listening to the most recent Zoom meeting, is everybody has to have their mics off unless they're speaking, because there's too much cross. contamination. So, good, okay. So that's ongoing and there's nothing has raised its head there. And then we have a bunch of tree reports, 4 of which are included in this package. And as I noted, I think we'll continue to do that, particularly with the tree reports, just so that we have a public record of the documentation of issues that may have come up and how we address them. And plus, there's some really lovely writing. They're really thoughtful, well-written things, so they're fun to read. So I don't know if there's anything that specific that we want to bring up, but this is how we're going to do it in the future so that we'll be able to talk about it if something comes up in the future. So we'll be doing this for tree reports for sure. Okay. Yes. Judy.
I just want to say, it's this first time I've seen these and I think they're amazing. And I think they really, really well written and they show fairly dramatically what a benefit it is to a resident of the town to call on us when they want to have a tree out, because they get so much more than just a yes or a no. And it's just remarkable. Thanks, Mary Ann, for the write-ups and the groups that go out and do it. I'm impressed.
I just wish there was a way to get more people to see them because they're just informative. You read them and think about them. Anyway,
When they are in the packet, people will see them.
good. Okay. Okay, we have some old business, and as usual, we start with oversight of the town-owned properties. And let us start with Springdown. And I believe that there was some discussion at a meeting that we'll talk about more in a little bit about open space maintenance and funding, but there was some some things that were brought up that we wanted to talk about. So, and one of them was seating. And would anybody like to talk about it?
I can start with just a little bit. I don't want to do the whole thing. I'll let Nancy do that, but I just, as a reminder that I have carefully husbanded since we got them and used them, so a fair amount of seeds of lupin nana, lupin micro, and tidy tips that we can use. So we're sort of ready to roll. The only other thing is that our experience told us over many years that from cheating in the right of way, that just throwing the seeds out doesn't work. You have to really get rid of the grasses where you're planting them and then pay attention to that through the year.
We planted some, but not too many. Fair amount. Thank you.
So then, are we going to be making like a work day or something where a few people go out and spread the seed? Is that what the plan is? And has there a plan been formulated at all, or are we still just kind of batting it around?
I think it would be lovely if we did, but there is no current plan.
Okay, we can make a plan.
Well, I think if we're seeding, we need to seed now.
Right.
So should we choose a date? And well, first of all, how many of us would like to do this?
Well, the problem I see is, like you said, the clearing before you do the seeding. That's the part that's going to take a lot of work. Just casting them out is trivial, but the clearing is so important.
What we did last time was we planted into the gopher mounds, which were semi-cleared, and a couple of us brought hose. And if you can just clear an area like this or half of this, and then plant your seeds in that, and that gives them a head start. Without the mowing that the town does, it's not enough, but it's sufficient to get it started.
So just like a tiny little 1 foot by 1 foot area kind of thing.
Yeah, or less. Multiple of those, yeah.
We usually go And doing, everything to kind of do that. Which we already did.
The other thing we learned was that not counted in the mowings that they attribute to mowing spring down. They, once in the spring, when the grasses start getting high, they mow like a 6-foot strip back from the trail. And we hadn't, they only started doing that a couple years ago. And it was right after we, we did this planting. So we need to hold our planting back that distance so the stuff doesn't get wiped out. So I'd be happy to participate in that day.
So do we have any proposal then as to when this would make sense to do? Dieter, as I recall in the past, you suggested we would try to target right before we saw a deluge. Is that right?
Now it's good for planting, right, for planting. And, we hope that we get another one like this, that is something that maybe, this week in December.
So what about December, which is not this coming weekend, but the following? So
You were saying
it's just,
around
it's a
the
proposal, Sunday, December the 8th.
8th,
No,
7th?
not,
Eight,
se-
eight.
December 8 is what I'm proposing. 7 does not work for me. It's a Sunday, say late morning, assuming the weather is good. Does that work for some core number of us that would be interested in doing it? Okay, so I'll bring the seeds that I have and including some, smaller jars full to give to individuals as they go around. I'll bring my hoe and my
We should be flexible. I've been wrong before, but, there was a good chance, if I remember right, around the 6th. And we want to get it in before I'll know more in a few days. So anytime from here on, when somebody has time, is good.
Are you saying you would go out by yourself on a day that looked good or? Okay,
But otherwise, we can make that a joint venture if the conditions are right.
right. Well, let's aim for spring down on 12/8 at say 11 o'clock. 11 a.m. And I'll bring stuff. And if anybody is motivated before then to go out and do it and need stuff, just contact me. I'm around, not here Thanksgiving the day after, but other than that, I'm around. And great. And everybody, if the spirit moves them, can come out.
Can I ask a question before then? And Nona, I'm looking at you because you're the one who's been so good about letting the committee know when there are invasives that need to be removed. Is there anything out there right now that we should address before we go out to spread seed? Like, I've forgotten what that thing was. It was like an allium or something. I've forgotten what it was that you told us about.
The Italian arum is the last thing.
Yeah.
Boy, I think it's too wet to go out there now and try and get it. I don't really think there's anything we can do right now other than plant. Anybody else have thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
I walked around it just about a week ago and there are a couple of large thistle. There are a few individual things that you walk around, they catch your eye, you could grab, but I don't think an organized thing would be needed now.
Great.
I have something else on spring down if we're ready to move on to the next spring down thing. I just wanted to share that I had a great interaction with Danny Dempsey because, at one of our last meetings, We talked about how the downed oak had been cut up and there were logs on the ground and that the trees had been limbed up. Well, it turns out that the town asked him to do that because kids were climbing on the oak and there was concern that somebody would get hurt. So he did it. And he was asked to limb up the pear trees and stuff so that mowing would be easier. So I said, well, while you were at it, it would have been great if you had cut the eucalyptus sprouts. And he said, okay, I'm on it. And he did it. And he said he's going to come to our next meeting in January and he's going to come when he can to sort of coordinate with us on stuff like that. So it was
Fantastic.
really cool.
Kim also told me she talked to him about the trachea and he will be looking for the trachea next year.
What is his role exactly?
He is the guy that does the chipper shredding for the fire department.
Okay, so he's employed by the fire department.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Is there anything going on at Frog Pond that we need to discuss?
We have to still get the subcommittee meeting organized. Well, I'll send a few dates out, see when Judy and Nona are around. So that's the open action item. It's has a little bit of water in it, not that much yet. And I think not discussing the recent exchanges on the forum, my personal view is we may have to look at least discussing the whole area. There's no signage, there are no fences, and the traffic is increasing, in particular with the Hawthorne planning coming up, and that kind of unofficial small trail that runs across it. So you can't even blame town people or out of town visitors because they have no clue what it is. So I think that we, at least for the Frog Pond, maybe for other places, need to consider having signage that people visiting, at least if they're interested, have a chance to see, oh yeah, that's something special, I shouldn't walk there. And because I personally think that the running around of the dogs is more damaging than anybody else and anything else that's going on. So I think we can discuss it in the subcommittee, but down the road, I think we should really think about how do we want to make it visible and clear to visitors that that's a special area.
So is this something that might benefit from a joint subcommittee with open space? Or, I don't know, to consider what kind of signage would make the most sense to be the most informative?
I think we can start with the subcommittee and I think we already had some ideas a year ago or so and can come and then present it and then maybe have a joint meeting on that one. So that's it.
I could be completely off base on this, but my impression that signage is really not very expensive and it's something that we might be able to do. And there'd be a huge benefit, I think, from having some signs.
So I know
It's,
from other committees that signage can be tricky in Portola Valley. It's pretty frowned upon, but that may have been in the past. It may be less difficult now. Just, we need to make sure we coordinate anything that we want to propose with the town. That's all.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that we could be creative about the appearance of the signs. It doesn't have to be like a metal painted on thing. It could be really neat.
Actually, there have been plenty of discussions about signs and the consensus it has to look like the town of Portola Valley sign. It has to be something like that. Because we had this discussion multiple times in many committees, and at the end of the day, the only signs that were approved were wooden that look rustic.
If it's wooden, it's fine.
I think it's, and maybe we should kickstart it. I think the town should consider reviewing some of it because on one hand, the town is complaining about people walking all over the place. Then on the other hand, the town doesn't want to provide any signage so that people that are at least willing to read can understand where they should go and not go.
Right.
So I think it's a good time to table.
It's interesting because in general signage has been discouraged because the signs all over everywhere. But it brings up an interesting issue, and that is maybe we should have some sort of, maybe the town should, or maybe we could start the process, have some sort of a template, what's acceptable size, material, color, et cetera, so that, it would fit the rubric, or it wouldn't, and there wouldn't need to be so much.
Actually,
discussion.
you could save some time going to the minutes of the Emergency Preparedness Committee, because they have been working for, I think, 2 years now on signage for the AM radio on the street. And there's a subcommittee and they have done a lot of work and they have a sign ready, but the town has not yet did it. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's there.
That's nice. And Trails also has had signage concerns, issues, et cetera, and they have some pretty specifics that they follow for the trail signage in town.
Open Space has discussed Frog Pond in particular. And one of the things that we thought is the sign should say, why is this called Frog Pond? And that would really help, I think, in terms of explaining both the site itself and the road remnant. So
Good idea.
Do you think we might increase our chances of continuing to have a little sway over what happens to that area if we rigorously call it Frog Pond Park instead of the road remnant? It was more or less shifted over when we had in 2019, we had the big discussion and got the council to say, yes, we'll protect this area. I just think the more we call it road remnant, even though it may be the legally precise thing, the more it sounds like just a piece of land that we can do whatever we want to with. So I'd recommend that we try really hard to use that phraseology in every setting. On the forum, especially on the forum where lots of people see it.
Ford Field and open space, anything going on there that? And town center?
To follow up from last month's meeting, when we talked about the pruning that happened, I did contact Justin and his feedback was that the fire folks who were doing clearing had a staff shortage. And so the people doing fire clearing, fire department, had a staff shortage. And so that was identified as a safe place for them to work. It was a stopgap measure. They didn't have to have anyone checking for traffic. So it was unexpected, and that was why there was no coordination and no oversight with us.
Who knows?
Okay, Shady Trail, is there anything going on at Shady Trail? Okay. And then the very last issue for town-owned properties was to discuss adding a second volunteer workday in fall, late August, early September to remove detrichia from public rights of way. So I think this is something that we should definitely consider.
Actually, I want to make one comment because of your assumption. This was the assumption because with your assumption. I think you said because Stanford did it with volunteers, did it was something we should do. as far as I could see, Stanford this year had 0 volunteers and actually hired somebody to do it. And badly enough, they did it when everything was in bloom with pickaxes and shovels. And they removed the plant. And by doing that, they were putting the seeds on. So anyway, so they didn't have volunteers this year.
So is this something that we feel committed enough? Somebody wants to drive this, or is something that, how do we want to move forward with bringing this together? You want a subcommittee? Who wants to be on the subcommittee?
Well, we already kind of have a working subgroup within this committee that we go out and do Detrichia removal on various parcels, et cetera, like for, I mean, we discussed this last meeting where Nona had done that lovely summary report.
Right.
So you're asking, this is totally.
Well, I'm
this is
asking,
Like the broom pole, you mean, where we engage the town?
so I'm asking, is that something that we want to do? Do we want to just keep it small, groups of individuals, or do we want to organize something where we try and get the scouts to come and I think there's pluses and minuses on both approaches. And I don't have strong feelings one way or the other.
This came
So-
up during the subcommittee meeting between Nona and Judith and one other person, Gary, where we thought, well, maybe we should introduce the community, because one of the issues that we've seen is that educating the public of the dangers of Detrichia seems to be an issue, and this committee is dedicated to educating the public and maybe having a work day like we do the broom pool. I'm happy to help organize another work day, but August and September fall into my winemaking season, so I wouldn't attend, but I can organize.
Great. I think just having somebody that's willing to be a lead for is great. So I'll put you down for that, and we can target doing something towards the end of next September. I mean, next August. Towards the end of August.
If the event is held in early August, I'm more likely to participate.
I think it's gonna be 100% dependent on the timing of the weed, so.
So this is a good thing to loop Danny into. Danny Dempsey is involved in that. And so if the fire department is doing mowing and can work with us on timing, then we could get some of it done that way. Maybe we can do the open space areas that are town owned and then see what else there is to do.
Danny is going to focus on the private land because that's the much bigger problem we have in town.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't need as many volunteers then. I mean, I guess we need to sort of size it up next year.
As
Good.
this
August is probably a hard
develops,
time.
if it becomes something that we want another banner, I happen to have just picked up the broom pole banner that is still on my plate to finish up. So the numbers work on it, so
Hey.
we can tie them, I can use that as a starting point if we decide we need one for the Detrichia.
Excellent, good.
August may be a hard time to get volunteers because school is out and I don't know what the scouts do at that time of year, and it's hot,
sometimes it's
hot,
not even
et cetera,
out.
and people are on vacation, yeah.
And yeah,
But
I mean,
It wouldn't hurt to kind of get organized around it, and we have a lot, the skeleton of organizing we have from Broom Pool. So you don't have to start from zero without lists of people to contact and all of that.
Right, and the fact that a lot of people go away on vacations, I think we don't get that many people in the first place. So I kind of feel like if people go on vacation, they go on vacation and we'll just live with what we got. So,
So this reminds me though, if I can loop back to Springdown and the seating, should we invite? I wouldn't do a big organizational thing, but should we just invite in some general way, like on the forum, people to come help, say we're seating this hour on this day, and would you like to, bring your hoe and we'll give you some seeds?
Sure.
and Some instructions and see if we get 3 or 4 people
be
out to help us.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
would
what
be
can it hurt?
really interested to know what kind of response you got
Right,
for that.
right.
It's probably worth just doing it for
So
that.
I'll do
I don't
that.
know.
I'll put it on the forum.
I think the timing here is rather critical because it's not the same time every year.
Right.
It needs to be when the trachea plant just starts to bloom
Right.
and it's easy to see these little yellow flowers. And
You know, I'm going to drive the whole effort as we, we'll have a brochure and whatever on the private, so I can easily
We can
reach out and give you a heads up.
Yeah.
Where we are in terms of when it's ready to be, and then you take it from there and you have your event.
Does it hurt to take it out before it starts blooming? Why do you wait till, I guess it's easy to identify, but if you're going to take it out,
It
why
will
does
come
it hurt?
back. You have to be really careful. You take it, you cut it or whatever, it will come back.
If you get the root,
Do it
it
way
won't.
early, yeah.
I have seen it come back so fast.
So you're saying that if you wait
Very
till
late.
it's seeding and cut it back,
No.
it doesn't come back?
No.
And wait till it's
Blooming,
flowering
start flowering.
and you cut it back,
Then
it doesn't come
the
back.
hope is that it's dry enough
Got it.
that it doesn't have to, the
Got
color
it.
will come back. It's
I
very
disagree.
tricky.
Once it's flowering, if you cut it and you don't bag it, it will go to seed. It'll
It-
Well,
literally.
of course it will go to seed. You have to take it.
Yeah, but if you cut it before it flowers, then you don't have to bag it. You can
That's
just
true.
let it decompose. You
Yeah.
make a pile and let it decompose.
The problem is I've seen Stanford has tried it and they have mowed, and it's come back. And then it was like that and it started to seed later.
Yeah, but mowing is different from cutting at the base. That would be my take on
Okay.
it.
the smaller plant, pardon me, the smaller plants are fairly easy just to pull. You
Yeah.
Put on some gloves and a long sleeve shirt so you don't get any dermatitis. And then you just,
Mhm.
That's
pull it.
easy. Yeah.
I did maybe 100
Let's make sure
times.
we put this on the agenda, like first quarter next year, so that we can really start to think about
Yeah, yeah.
timing,
Good idea.
what we need to do, et cetera. It
Yeah.
sounds like there's an interest, so let's make sure we include it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like February time frame gives us plenty of lead time,
Yeah.
and it's probably at the same time we're gonna be in the thick of doing the broom pull stuff.
You
so
know
it'll
what I
just
think?
Dovetail together.
We might want to take the learnings from next year's broom pull and so not start thinking about Detrichia until we're done with broom. So how about that? Okay, good. All right. Okay. Anything else on oversight of town-owned properties? So as far as town cooperation committee, town cooperation with Public Works. Oh, Dave is on. I haven't heard and haven't had any contact with the Public Works people, so no news on that front.
Actually, I have reached out to Scott on an issue on the Cervantes Trail and he was very cooperative. He was very helpful.
Who is this?
Scott?
Scott, excellent. Okay, good. Is there any updates from the trails and paths?
The meeting will be held in 2 weeks. No
Okay,
meet. No update.
all right. Well, now we move on to the topic of the joint conservation and open space subcommittee recommendation on maintenance and funding for open space, which is Appendix E. So Nona was going to talk about.
Yeah, so this was the joint subcommittee consisting of Nancy, Judy, Gary Nielsen from Open Space and me. And we were charged with coming up with recommendations for the council for how much of the 2% UUT to apply to open space maintenance this year. As you remember, last year we did 44,000 from the 2% UUT. And it turns out that of that, about 15,000 was used for mowing. The 25,000 that was supposed to be used for weeding was not used for that. They didn't have Go Native do Spring Down last year. So what we decided on is we wanted to have a way of making sure that the 2% UUT allocation this year could cover all of the maintenance and trail work within the town-owned open spaces. So that's the mowing, the weeding, and any trail work in open space. There are about 4 miles of trails in town-owned open space, with the goal being that we would cover everything that we intended to cover last year, plus enough to cover the trail work and actually to more realistically cover the mowing and the weeding. So that's really comes to about 40 or 45K for the mowing and weeding, and then 15 to 20 for the trail work and other vegetation maintenance, such as the pruning that Scott does in Triangle Park and things like that. So that was the reason for that, to give the town some flexibility in terms of having access to 2% UUT for legitimate uses within town-owned open space, but not sort of dip into it more broadly for things like our second recommendation, which was to not apply it to trail maintenance on trails outside the town-owned open spaces. So not in the road right-of-ways and not in, say, Coal Mine Ridge. And the reason being that the right-of-ways are used for many things. And I won't go into all the details of the recommendation since you have it all. But also that a lot of people work on those trails, not just town staff. The third recommendation was that we have more coordination between the town staff and open space and conservation, partly to have checks and balances to make sure that if we allocate something, it actually gets done, but also to think about the timing better, because Justin knows as well as anyone, and he really seems very enthusiastic about working with us to get the timing right on things like the mowing and the weeding. And then lastly, we recommended a return to annual reports to the town council from each committee so that they have a better idea of, what we did this year, but what we do every year. So our meeting was on November 7th. Because of the timing of the town council decision on the budget for the 23-24 year, we had to make the decision to bring this recommendation to them before this committee could vote on, and before open space could vote on it either. So it's already gone in, already made the budget decisions. And so this is really just a request to say, okay,
Rubber stamp.
Yeah.
we're okay with it. Open space had a few word changes they would have made, but it was too late. So they just said, okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Really good work. I have just a quick question from me. Remember the Sequoia trails that we did so much work along that long stretch of trail? Does that qualify as, that would be town trails, right? And not open space trails, right?
Right, that's a regular town trail, but not a town open space trail. So that's the sort of fine line that we're trying to figure out. And it's not that we say you shouldn't do it. It's just that there should be some kind of a meeting with Trails and Paths Committee and, neighborhood groups, because like Hayfields, I think they do their own trails. And we don't really know who does what. And it'd be great to know that. And
Sure.
maybe the town should be getting more of the 2% UUT for trail. I don't know, but we don't really know who does what.
And wouldn't it be nice too, if we found out more, in a more timely way, how much of the town resources actually are being spent? Meaning you were like, it was like pulling teeth to find out the information that you got about how much money was being spent on maintenance for the various open spaces. I mean, is there any way to have that information more readily available to the committees to begin with?
Well, I think it depends on the relationship that we have with whoever makes the decisions, right? And my impression is that there's been a really strong move towards greater transparency and sort of open books. So I think we'll get that information going forward. I hope.
That's been the message that I've heard, is that everybody feels like they need a lot more information than they've gotten. And so that's being pushed strongly. So I agree.
Top to the bottom. Mary, could you give us some feedback on what the reaction to this was? Did the council talk about it all, or was it just in the packet and was just submitted? The proposal about spending just that part of the UUT. Okay. Mhm.
And I did present it to the town council on the 13th.
So you
So
heard their
I
discussion.
sent it in as
Mhm.
a public comment and went to everybody. And I presented it at the
Okay.
meeting. And the main question that I got was actually from Tony McFarland on whether or not that extra funding, that sort of 15 to 20,000 extra could be used in part to fund Justin's time for managing things like mowing and weeding at Springdown. And my response was that the subcommittee was trying to fund any legitimate use of town staff time on maintenance of town-owned open space. And that included some of Scott's time when he was doing trail work or vegetation maintenance, and also some of Justin's time for managing things. And I think that was the only clarification that I was asked. I think, yeah, I didn't get a sense that there was a lot of pushback. And actually the follow-up was that Tony asked me for the report. So I think he kind of got that we're trying to be as helpful as we could.
So action from us in discussing this is, I would like to propose that that our committee supports creating a standing joint subcommittee. I guess that we vote to do that and request that our comrades in the open space committee do similar. And it occurs to me, if we talked about meeting just, quarterly or something like that, it's not a all the time thing, that we might invite Justin to join us for like an hour of that. So we don't take up a lot of his time, but they'd be, embedded with us, if you will. So there's much smoother communication. Do I need to make that a should I make that a formal motion?
I think so.
Okay.
One thing I was wondering, could we, as this is specific money, get a running total of what has been spent? So that we know?
We can ask. I don't know sort of when the warrant list goes out in terms of what payments are being made. So I think it's mainly having that, a really good relationship with whoever makes those decisions and is in charge of the contracts. One thing that's really interesting is that the no bid contract limit used to be 25K. And that's one of the reasons why the Go Native contract was 24.5. But that limit is now 45K. So it's worth keeping that in mind, partly because, you know, Justin has found them to be really great. They know what they're doing. They know the town's priorities. And so it actually is an efficient use of his time to work with them.
Okay, so let me go back to making a formal motion that this committee supports creating a standing joint subcommittee with open space to ensure that maintenance priorities are identified and carried out in period, and that we work closely with town staff. And that committee works closely with town staff in an ongoing way.
I'll second.
I think, all in favor? Yeah, discussion. I was waiting for that, but does that, would anybody like to just discuss it further? All in favor? You have, there's Dave Cardinal is, but nobody has raised their hand. If anybody would like to, yep, maybe Dave has something to say.
I'm good with this, so thumbs up.
Okay, good. Mary. Yeah, so all in favor? We're in the middle of voting for a motion. Yeah, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we have a new standing subcommittee. Mary.
Well, it's a lot of money and it's supposed to be paid by FEMA. So why would that come out of? Well, that's the last thing I heard from Howard. And I brought this up some time back.
That is what has been discussed for 2 years at the Trails Committee meeting, but no one knows what the status is now with Howard's departure.
I think it's too much money to come out of this.
Well, and the criteria, yeah, the criteria that's here is basically if it were in the Shady Trail open space little place, then we might have some piece of it's on the Shady Trail that's not in the open space, then it's not.
Okay. So the next is a discussion of the work that the Fencing and Wildlife Quarters Committee has done, which is also basically coming to addressing the existing fencing ordinance and making some changes. So Appendix F, which is attached, has that. And Mary Ann, would you like to lead that?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have to go through the wording because it's not finalized yet. So the subcommittee met and made a lot of progress, but there are a few definitions we're still working on, particularly with the width of the width definition. Does anybody have any comments on the wording that you all got? Any feedback?
I do. I want to understand how you came up with 40 inches, because that seems to be a
We can answer that.
very impractical. If what you're suggesting is that someone is choosing to put up a fence and you're limiting it to 40 inches. So
Wait,
doesn't that then lead someone to put up two fences is what my response was when I read that.
We had a lot of discussion about that. Megan, do you want to address that? We had a lot of discussion about that. For
Yeah.
those reasons.
And we pulled that from established guidelines that seem to be fairly universal across the Western United States for wildlife-friendly fencing. Standards are 40 to 42 inches in height so that deer and other animals can easily jump over it. Even though we know that they can jump over higher fences, if we're treating it as a corridor, it should make it easy for them to cross us rather than, a challenging thing that they could potentially jump over. And then there's also a standard that there should be a gap below the fence of 16 to 20 inches to allow smaller animals and fawns, animals that can't jump as high yet to pass underneath the fencing. So agreed, our goal will be to not allow a double fence, which would also impede movement of wildlife. I think that's part of why we're still trying to finesse the language and make sure that we don't have odd conflicts.
Double fences are not permitted. That's in the ordinance.
Well, what I'm saying though is being realistic about it. If someone feels that they want to put up fencing around their property for specific reasons such as dogs, containment, that sort of thing, you basically are telling them, okay, you just need to put your second fence a little bit further back is what I would say. But you are basically saying to someone, you have to put up two fences because if the wildlife corridor fence can only be 40 inches high and you've got a dog that's a jumper, he's not going to be contained.
I think, so the hope is that people will not put up fences across a wildlife corridor. That shouldn't be a fence that's helping someone contain their animals or protect their vegetable garden. If you want to have or need a fence that's taller and more secure for animals, that's where this discussion of a dimension comes in, where a corridor would be a strip of land that is unfenced. And the remainder of your property, you are free to fence in accordance with the remaining fencing guidelines. So it shouldn't be a double fence. We've done a lot of diagrams and talking through this and trying to figure it out, but be interested to get what you're envisioning to make sure we're covering it in the ordinance.
I don't think it was meant to apply to the fences that people put around it's not a suggestion that the perimeter fencing must be wildlife friendly. It's talking about fencing in the corridors or at the corridors. Is that right? It doesn't apply to the fence you want to have.
Right.
That the people currently have for their perimeter fencing.
it's-
It's only where it
Yeah.
interacts with the wildlife corridor.
It's not a 40-inch surrounding the property fence. That's not what it is.
I understand that's not the intent, Marianne. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, yes, and I also, I do support maintaining wildlife corridors. Let's be perfectly clear about that. I am not in any way trying to say that's not an important function and that's not an important thing for us to be doing. I fully agree that it's very important. But when I was reading through the proposed changes, it sort of got all enmeshed such that when I'm reading it, it came across to me as saying, if you want to, for whatever reason, put up fencing, and I'm not talking about across a corridor, I'm talking about lining, that's what you're saying, is you're trying to maintain whatever the final proposed width is. You're asking someone to maintain that. And what we have been seeing as a committee over the past several years, and we've talked about it routinely, is people are blocking. They're not even attempting to maintain any sort of wildlife access. They're saying, this is my kingdom and I want it completely enclosed. And
Excuse me. I agree with Teresa that when I read how it was written, it was very confusing to me. it seemed to me, and my uneducated, haven't read everything, I just thought that it meant, oh, now all fences have to be 4 feet.
No,
And that's the part that I think we need to be able to clarify, because you clearly didn't mean that, but that's how I read it.
so,
The language specifically says only wildlife-friendly fencing is permitted in or across existing wildlife corridors. It's the only
Not
place it
along.
applies.
not
It doesn't-
along,
Doesn't say along,
cross.
across or in.
Yeah, share this.
Who defines what a an existing wildlife corridor is?
That's what so to come back to the premise, this is the first low-hanging fruit, which means we want to, as quickly as possibly, protect existing wildlife corridors, which in most cases is that somebody, buys a property, has no fence at the moment, and wildlife is going through and wants to put in a fence. And then they can do their fence whatever they want to, but there will be a corridor of a to be defined width, maybe 6 feet, maybe, yeah. And that has then the wildlife friendly fence across, so that the animal has a corridor. People think about that. That's the simplest case, okay? And can jump over it. That's what we're talking. Now, second, where it will take much more time, is there is the room to roam bill, which has just come, which been written into law. And towns like Portola Valley will have to follow the law. And that will be then much clearer too, and people will be forced to probably to do more things to keep those corridors going. So this is just the simple low-hanging fruit.
Right, I guess my question is only who's gonna say, and who says it to who? I mean, who tells who?
Okay.
That something's.
So
active
that
animal?
brings, thank you. That brings up a point, and I'll bring it in here. What I have been discussing sort of one-on-one is the idea that when there is a fence permit, that we treat a fence permit like we treat a tree permit. And obviously, this is something the whole committee, and this is yet not the point to talk about that. But if we come to that point, which would be really good in terms of for the wildlife, that in the same way as the town works really well with us on the trees right now, they work with us on the fences, then we're there, we can explain, and we can find middle ground and a solution.
That's what I was looking for. Good, yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think tying that to the discussion of how we define the width of a corridor, there are no real precedents that we've been able to find for suburban and urban definitions of wildlife corridors and how to preserve them. There are county level documents. Ventura was one of the first counties to develop guidelines. They tend to be based on very thorough and researched definitions of where the wildlife corridors are, involving biologists and studies. And I think what we're looking for is a simple, easy to apply, easy to follow guideline that allows for permeability across town, not trying to identify specifically where wildlife are currently moving or aren't. And that uses the language that's already written into our ordinance. So we're not writing something that seriously, detracts from someone's ability to fence and use their property the way they want to, but can be easily reviewed and applied in the planning step.
I mean, what we have seen in the last few years, and it was particularly in Westridge, where people with their permit were asking for a fence, and then we went out, and then they pulled the fence back, and they left a real corridor. So, it's the simplest case. And that is sort of the modus operandi at the moment in town. at the big parcels that are unfenced, if somebody comes in and they want their whatever 4-6 foot fence, they pull it back. And then there is really an open space with no fence, nothing in that area. And that's the 6 feet or whatever it is. But this is just a sort of a working thing, and it's just one case.
I think the important thing is that if we can get it into the ordinance and into the graphic summary that you got a piece of, then it will become part of what the building permit people, they have their checklist and they go through, and this will be on it. And when ASCC looks at the plan, when we look at the plans and then send it on, and when ASCC looks at the plan, it'll be, here's this thing you must comply with. Does this plan comply with it? And then it all becomes much more automated, and you don't have to sort of go back and scold somebody because they did it wrong, because it's clear from the beginning what they should be doing.
Right, and having us come out and do a site visit, because remember when we were discussing it before, it was always like, who at the front desk is gonna say that this is a wildlife corridor or is not a wildlife corridor? So having us or somebody like us make the input is perfect.
Yeah.
I think it's great. Good.
So
But I think Teresa's point is well taken in that it's probably the way it needs to get presented and sold, if you will. It needs to be crystal clear that we are not talking about all those other fences. We are talking about only the fencing that might impede a wildlife corridor. It's the only time it applies. Just tiny little percentage of the fences. But yeah, people go bonkers if they think we're telling them they can only have a 40-foot fence, and that's not what we're doing.
that's not what we're doing.
All right. Dave, would you like to make your comment?
I would. I'm surprisingly maybe much more aggressive on this. I think our entire town is a wildlife corridor. We have mountain lions on our driveway, bobcats, foxes, near the house, and it's part of their territory. They hunt in our yard, I presume, or whatever. So the notion there's a wildlife corridor assumes that we're not really a wildlife habitat. It basically says that they're moving through our community to get somewhere else. But we have thousands of acres that we're now putting houses on that was, and I think still should be, habitat. So for me, I don't see any excuse for random fencing. Some of our neighbors have electric fences for their dogs, which work great and don't do anything for the wildlife. If you want a play yard for your kids, fine. If you want a small yard for your dog, fine. Although, as we've learned, the coyotes and everybody else can jump over that and make mincemeat of your dog. So that's not a total solution. But the idea of perimeter fencing or leaving a corridor, I don't know. That strikes me more like an Atherton play. I think fencing should be mostly not allowed unless somebody can prove why they allow it. So call me radical, but that's my thought.
Way to go.
We love radicals.
Yeah, wouldn't we like to
Yeah,
be
but
radical?
But the sad fact is that there are many properties in Portola Valley today that have complete perimeter fencing. And when new people come in and they tear the house down and they build a new house, they are allowed to keep that perimeter fencing. We've all seen it. We've all seen it multiple times. We've commented on it repeatedly. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's already there,
there.
that this is in existence. It's great to say we are a community of free roaming wildlife, but I'm here to say we're not, because I can look out my backyard and I have solid fencing on 3 sides of my house, not my property, but my neighbor's. And it's existing and it's been there. So there's another issue here, which is we're talking philosophically about when we are looking at new property, new developments, new fence permits, et cetera. But the historical situation also deserves a little thought. I'm not suggesting we can go in and ask people to change what they've already had there existing, but this is something we run into all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I see it has gotten quite bad lately. People who move in now, their 6-foot fence is not good enough anymore. So what we do is they put those little posts and then they put 3 lines of wire and then they make it whatever it is. So we are aware of that. What we are doing is our focus at the moment is to save what is to save. So yes, wouldn't we love to go after everybody who has a perimeter fence and ask them to take the perimeter fence down? I don't think we'll get very far. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to save what there is to save. That's the first step.
Right, and I think that all of us who have gone out on site visits to properties that do have perimeter fencing have made suggestions about removing at least parts of it. So I think that that's something that we should continue to do as we do site visits, recommend removal of parts, just.
Clearly, I think
Absolutely.
philosophically, we're all with you, Dave, and at every opportunity, we suggest to people that they take out part of their fence, or that they don't put in a new fence, or that they pull that fence back substantially from the perimeter. We put that in our reports that we do that get sent to ASCC. We request that ASCC make it a condition of approval. So we do what we can. And what we're doing now is attempting to put our fingers in a hole in the dike, because nothing in the ordinances speaks to this, speaks to wildlife corridors, or speaks to wildlife friendly fencing near those areas. We're trying to get that in the ordinance before too many more big properties put up their fences and we can't do anything about it.
People are getting more and more worried, and they have bigger and bigger fences and bigger castles around there. So that's,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the ASCC is, especially with Dana and Carter, and I think some of the others are pretty much on board with a lot of this. So I don't know how to deal with existing fencing, but I would be very aggressive about new fencing, and I think they would support you for sure. And whatever you can get approved, because it just isn't, it's not Portola Valley. And I think most people would agree that it's not Portola Valley. You know, if someone wants to move in and build Atherton, it's not really what we're hoping they would do.
And if we can get this ordinance passed, then we give ASCC ammunition for making those conditions of approval, because it's in the ordinance. So they don't have to be saying, gee, it would be nice if you did this. They can say, in our ordinance, you may not.
Yeah, and then we'll work on the room to roam bill, because there we have the law on our side. Yeah,
Good.
but that will take time. That's a lot of work. So,
Good, okay.
any other, is there any other feedback to the existing wording? Because some of the existing wording will stay and we'll add a few things. And so our idea is that we will have this finalized for the next meeting, and that we then can send it on to the powers to be.
Perfect. Good, thank you. This is really good work. Okay, I believe that there's nothing going on about the Hawthorns at the moment. It's just percolating along. So let's move on to routine town communications. Is there anything in kudos? Marianne?
Not the time for kudos.
Not the time for kudos. Okay, or backyard habitat.
Yeah, I have my list. That's all I have. Oh, but important, our town council. Can we get on the at the very end of the December town council meeting, to give Judy her award. It will only take 3 minutes.
Traditionally, in the December meeting, the council would give that award to the people who all through the year had gotten it. And I don't know how one gets on an agenda these days, but
We're asking you to help to get this on the agenda.
Oh, good.
Well, whatever.
so not the special meeting because that's solely devoted, but the one after that, right?
We can take this offline.
We
Yeah.
don't need to do it now.
Yeah.
It's just, I just wanted to throw this out to you that we.
Okay.
It is on there. Thank you.
Tip of the month, I think, somebody suggested doing one on the chorus frogs and frog pond. And I think that's a great idea to bring.
The other thing is, what about, this is the time of year to do your tree work. Through the year, we do a lot of pushback on people who want to do it when the birds want to do it in the spring, want to do it in the early summer. And as opposed to saying, don't do it now, might it be nice to say, do it now, do it now. And the other thing that would
Especially
fall
not a bad,
into
it's not a
that
bad idea.
into
The
the
frogs will be around for another
rubric
month,
right
couple
now
months.
is sod, is now the time to do the sod treatment, and people just to give a mention of that. Much as I love the frogs.
Well, the frogs will get their day.
Well, since we won't meet in December, maybe we could approve one for December as
Mhm.
well and make that the frog.
Make that the
chorus frog.
frog. Yeah, traditionally, we used to go out the frog pond on New Year's Eve and listen to the frogs, so I know that they're always out there.
Good, okay. So that's great, December. I mean,
Tree work
January.
now.
yeah, so
Dec-
tree work now.
No, as the,
frogs in
as the
January.
November, no, and then December, when we don't have a meeting, is frogs.
Right.
And then January, we'll decide on January.
Tree work. Alright, good, okay. And what's blooming now? We could take a break for a month. I still haven't done the berries one. That's just about to go out, so. Yeah, let's
Berries.
just finish up the year with that and start again in January. Good. So,
There, the thing people keep asking me about is all the acorns on the ground and oak masting. I wonder if it would make sense to, I don't know, do something about that.
Yeah, I would like to know too, why they're singing.
Have that instead of what's blooming now, it's like, what's happening? What's happening now?
Just a link to something by Walt Koenig or something like that. He has a nice article. Walt Koenig, who did Hastings Reservation. I'll send you a.
that's
I'll-
a, yeah, dude, that's a great idea. Cause that's a really interesting
like to
topic.
know-
I'd like to
I'll
know
send you
more.
a couple references, okay?
Okay, good. Okay, cool.
About acorns. This year is probably the most I've seen. I've lived here 64 years. And it's called a mast. And there is so much like this afternoon on my property, but I've seen it all over town. There's one area you don't see the dirt. It's all solid acorn. It's totally unreal.
Yeah.
I hope they're not all going to sprout.
Are all the species doing it?
Some oaks are on 1 year cycle from bloom to, and some are on 2. I think this is a reflection of the big rain 2 years ago.
But
Ah.
acorns are tiny.
They are.
Those are coast live oak.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering, is it mostly the live oaks that are doing this, or are the other oaks doing it
Yeah.
as well? It's the live oaks, isn't it? That's what I thought, because I have
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
both blues and blacks
Yeah.
on my property, and I don't see those
Maybe
acorns
it's a
falling
sign
out.
of doom, they're dying.
No.
Last
This
year was
is
a great year for
all
black
building.
oaks, but this is a really great year for coast live oaks.
Okay, I can tell we're getting anxious to get to the last agenda item. I just wanted to, just to say that we will be having an election in January. And, are you gonna be willing to do, vice chair again? I'm happy to be chair again. And I think said you'd be willing to take over the secretary role. Right, so I'll let them fight it out. You guys can work on it. Yeah. Yeah. But
Teresa mentioned when she was voted secretary before, that she might be ready to not do it. So she did say that to me almost a year ago.
I think it's meant as a gift, not a reshuffle under duress.
it's actually, I really find, and that's part of the reason why I suggested Nancy do it. It's such a great way to learn everything that we do. It took me forever to learn all of the different projects and the nuances and stuff. And if I had done the minutes, it might have gone faster, it might not, but it wouldn't have made it go slower. I can tell you that much. Okay. All right. So the next meeting is January 28th in the year of our Lord 2025, 7 p.m. So we'll see you there. Happy holidays. Happy Thanksgiving.
And see you at Springdown on the 8th if possible.
We will see you all at Springdown with your seed and your hose.
Meeting adjourned,
Meeting adjourned.
8:18 PM.
Which is, oh, the, yes, because Judy is getting, yes, people, yeah. Yes, so December 11th, at the beginning of the meeting, we'll all be here to support our Judy getting her
Meeting
award.
adjourned, so we're logged off.
All right, thank you.